It's New Year's Eve, and people are celebrating. But before the sun rises, celebrations will turn deadly. Witnesses remember seeing Kurt Johnson being thrown into a van.
He said he was the devil, and he was there to do the devil's work.
You see it in movies and TV shows, you don't think you're gonna see it in reality.
Will Kurt Johnson see the new year in, or are things about to take a turn for the worse? In Griggs County, beside the Cheyenne River Valley, is the small community of Cooperstown, North Dakota. It's named after R.C. Cooper, a bonanza farmer who built the first wood-framed house in the area in 1880. With a humble population of just under 1,000, Cooperstown aims to maintain the spirit and values of a small, rural American town.
Griggs County is a small rural area in North Dakota, kind of centralized. You just got a main highway going through, so you have this truck traffic, agriculture.
About 900 people, give or take. Very tight-knit people live there. Community's very close. Everybody pretty well knows everybody that lives within that community.
Cooperstown is a religious community, and the area is host to a number of churches and Bible camps. The town's slogan is Unlimited Possibilities, which takes on a new meaning after the events of December 31st, 2010. One of the local residents in Cooperstown is 54-year-old Kurt Johnson. Kurt Johnson is born and raised in Cooperstown. He attends North Dakota State University, where he receives a degree in construction management in 1974. Shortly after graduation, Kurt gets married and fathers 3 children. After 9 years, Kurt's family moved to Champaign, Illinois, where Kurt works for a new company, specializing in pavement engineering. Kurt and his family moved to Bismarck, where he works as a senior engineer for the North Dakota Department of Transportation. He oversees plans for new projects. The Johnson family relocate once again when Kurt gets a job in Falls Church, Virginia. Kurt's new position is project manager at the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials.
Kurt Johnson's a regular American family man. He's a blue-collar worker. He's not afraid to roll up his sleeves in order to provide for his family.
In 2003, Kurt gets divorced and returns home to Cooperstown. He finds work as a transportation research engineer with the Upper Great Plains Regional Transportation Institute. Moving back home to Cooperstown allows Kurt to mentor students at his alma mater, North Dakota State University. He shares his experiences and encourages the students to stay in North Dakota, to use their technical knowledge within the state. Outside of work, Kurt enjoys working on his home, taking pride in the regular maintenance along with other activities like gardening, and waiting for bucks to appear from his hunting shack in Paradise Valley. He's also a devout man. A local Bible camp plays a big part in his life. He's very well liked in the community. Many residents describe him as kind with a quick wit. Since returning to Cooperstown 7 years ago, Kurt's made a good name for himself. It's the last night of 2010, and he decides to head down to the local Oasis bar to ring in the new year. He takes a seat at the bar next to Daniel Wacht, a town newcomer. He introduces himself, and Daniel eagerly greets him. Kurt and Daniel quickly hit it off. They're chatting and laughing about all sorts of things. Daniel Wacht serves in the Marine Corps from 1997 until 1999. Daniel leaves the Marines due to a disagreement with the bureaucracy. After leaving the Marines, Daniel moves to California to be with his family. In September of 2010, Daniel moves to Cooperstown in an attempt to create a fresh start. On December 31st, 2010, Daniel is celebrating the new year with some local residents, one who is Jason Bulstad. As the night wears on, Daniel leaves to go check out a local bar. Where he hangs around before running into Kurt Johnson. New Year's Eve is a joyous time that promises to bring in changes and new beginnings. This is just the kind of party and companionship the two bachelors can use to while away the evening. At some point in the evening, they enter the washroom together. Carrie Sad, the bartender, hears laughing and more drinking happening from inside the washroom. But it's New Year's Eve, so she thinks nothing of it. A short while later, Daniel and Kurt return to their seats, but something's off. Over the next 45 minutes, Kurt becomes extremely intoxicated. Carrie says that when Kurt first entered the bar, he showed no signs of intoxication. But this all changes when he returns from the washroom. From the time he goes in to the time he comes out, he goes from 0 to 60.
It takes approximately 1 hour for 0.6 ounces of alcohol, or for example, 1 standard drink, to be properly digested by an average size male. When multiple drinks are consumed before the body has time to process them, this is when an individual becomes intoxicated. The process of intoxication occurs slowly and has a delayed process. Interesting, from what a witness says about Kurt Johnson is that he goes from showing no signs of intoxication to being completely inebriated within 1 hour time. Kurt is witnessed to be only in the bathroom for several minutes, and at that time, he only had 1 beer with him. The behavior that Kurt portrays is not consistent with the effects of alcohol.
But then something happens that belies Kurt's inebriation. Everyone in the bar turns to see what happens. Kurt's getting sloppy in the bar, and the owners will have none of that. The bartender, Carrie, threatens to call the sheriff to calm Kurt down. Keen to keep his newfound friend, Daniel says he'll drive him home. With the help of another bar regular, Tim Vincent, Daniel gets Kurt into his van. Carrie tells everyone that everything is okay and they should return to what they're doing. Daniel thanks Tim, saying he'll take it from here. Daniel takes the lead, thanking Tim for his time, but he's got it from here. With Kurt's intoxication, it takes a stern hand to get him loaded up, but with him safely in the van, Daniel drives off. According to Daniel, he arrives at Kurt's home where he exits the van and stumbles up the front steps and into the house. It looks like Kurt is receiving a safe ride home after a fun night that got a bit out of hand. How can the citizens of Cooperstown know that Kurt Johnson will never be seen alive again? In Griggs County, nestled beside the Cheyenne River Valley, is Cooperstown. The majority of Cooperstown is Caucasian, with a median age of 51. Cooperstown is known for the Ronald Reagan Missile Site 555. Here, visitors can get a first-hand look at a Cold War-era intercontinental ballistic missile site, take in the security that surrounds it, and travel 50 feet underground to the Launch Command Center, where the airmen held the keys to the future of humanity. Thankfully, their resolve was never shaken. But what happens on New Year's Eve 2010 shakes the residents of Cooperstown to their core. At around 9 p.m., Kurt Johnson sits down beside Daniel Wacht. The two men instantly hit it off. Kurt becomes visibly intoxicated, falling off his stool, and Daniel offers to drive him home. In the coming days, Kurt is nowhere to be seen, and his family is wondering why he hasn't contacted them since New Year's Eve. Surely he'd call. On January 4th, Kurt's cousin goes to his house to see if he's around. It's been a few days, and his worry is turning into concern. He searches every room, even opening up closets and looking in cupboards. But there's no sign of Kurt anywhere. Disheartened he can't find him, he calls the sheriff's department and reports Kurt missing. Soon after receiving the call from Kurt's cousin, Officer Murray, a local county sheriff, is questioning witnesses. The first is bartender Carrie Sad, who sees Kurt leave with Daniel. Carrie gives her account of the evening, noting how strange it is that when the two men return from the bathroom, Kurt becomes extremely intoxicated over the next hour, despite not drinking that much. She says he falls off a stool, and Daniel, along with another patron in the bar, escort him out, saying he'll drive him home. Tim Vincent, who helped Daniel get Kurt out of the bar, explains that Kurt's extremely intoxicated and that Daniel offers to drive him home. He says he helps Daniel walk Kurt to his van, where he sees Daniel roughly throw Kurt into his van. He finishes by saying he goes back inside the bar while Daniel drives away.
Multiple sources report seeing Kurt with Daniel, and they indicate that Daniel was driving Kurt home.
Interestingly, the sheriff discovers that Daniel contacts the sheriff's department the night of December 31st. He meets with the officer and responds to the call to hear what happened. The officer tells him that it's around 3 in the morning. Daniel is driving along Highway 200 during the snowstorm. He misjudges a turn and ends up in the ditch.
I get a phone call saying that there was a stranded motorist that needed assistance. And we head out on Highway 200 west of Cooperstown for this motor assist.
A short while later, a squad car pulls up behind Daniel. He approaches the officer and explains what happened.
The snowstorm in North Dakota, it can shut down the whole state. You can sometimes barely see the hood of your vehicle driving this stuff.
When the officer steps towards the van to examine it, Daniel quickly steps in front of him and insists that they stay away from the van.
You know, we asked if we can go, just make sure the vehicle's okay. And he's like, hey, I don't want you by my vehicle. So I was like, all right, we'll just get you in the car. You know, get all this, the wind's blowing. It's very difficult to even keep your eyes open.
Daniel gets in the squad car and Officer Brown drives away.
Didn't want us to go approach the vehicle, kind of red flag that there could be something wrong with it, or he had something in the car he didn't want us seeing, drug paraphernalia, weapons, stuff like that. There could be 100 things that could be in that van. But with the situation going on with the winter and the storm and everything, we just felt it'd be safe for us to just get him to Cooperstown and get us out of that situation. Because our nearest backup would have been hours away with the snowstorm. And that's the last thing we want to deal with out there.
Daniel claims he's alone in the vehicle and that he's dropped off Kurt, his drunk passenger, earlier that evening. Officer Murray, the county sheriff, widens his search. While he has a reasonable picture of what happened that evening, it's by no means complete, and his next interview sheds doubt onto Kurt's last known whereabouts. Kurt Johnson has a local man shovel the sidewalks on his property. The snow shoveler says that when he arrives at Kurt's home on the morning of January 1st, there are no footprints in the snow.
Well, there's a snowfall on the night of December 31st, so If Kurt Johnson had been walking in the snow into the house, his footprints would have been visible the next morning.
Many of the witnesses so far say Daniel is taking Kurt home. But this new information suggests Kurt never arrives there. Something happens after Daniel drives away from the bar. While the investigation is happening, Daniel heads east of Cooperstown to Crosby, Minnesota. He returns on Highway 10 after making a few stops in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, and Fargo, North Dakota, when he receives a phone call from the sheriff. Daniel is confirmed to be the last person with Kurt on the night of December 31st. With him missing, they need to talk to Daniel immediately. Daniel is arrested on January 5th, 2011. Before being transported to the station for questioning, a quick search reveals he is carrying a 9mm Glock pistol that is loaded with 10 rounds of ammunition.
There's no real concrete evidence linking Kurt's disappearance to Daniel. So the sheriff is really hoping that Daniel will make a confession of some kind that will link him to the crime.
Officer Murray presses him for details on what happens the night of December 31st, after he leaves the bar with Kurt. Daniel's version of the story seems to make sense. He says that upon leaving the bar, he asks Kurt where he lives. When he doesn't receive a response, he raises his voice. Kurt becomes hostile. He yells before mumbling to himself. Frustrated, Daniel drives home. When he arrives at his house, he leaves Kurt in the van, hoping that he'll sober up. In the meantime, he heads in and makes himself a drink. He takes a moment to enjoy it, hoping that Kurt will sober up and that he can get him home. Returning to his van, he finds Kurt is still obnoxiously intoxicated. With his good intentions backfiring, he decides to drop Kurt off at the Fishbowl Bar, just across the street from the Oasis Bar where they started their night. Officer Murray has already questioned witnesses at the Fishbowl, and they confirm that Kurt was never there. Daniel says he drops Kurt off in the parking lot. Perhaps Kurt changed directions after he drives away. But there's another issue. Daniel's pistol is in direct violation of a previously unknown warrant against Daniel.
Well, it turns out Daniel is known to police. He's had a troubled past.
Between the years of 2001 and 2008, Daniel receives several charges and appears in many court cases in California. These charges include grand theft auto, burglary, and use of force with a dangerous weapon. He's also barred from owning a firearm. On top of his rap sheet, there is a warrant out for his arrest in California.
Daniel's move to Cooperstown for a fresh start may in fact be an attempt to escape his criminal past. Daniel's criminal record indicates he may be more dangerous than he seems.
Within the small, peaceful community of Cooperstown, something terrible happens. Kurt Johnson goes missing. On the night of December 31st, 2010, Daniel Wacht offers to give Kurt a ride home as he's clearly too intoxicated and can barely stand. But when Officer Murray is told that Kurt never arrives home that night, he knows something is up. Daniel is questioned about what happens after he leaves the bar with Kurt. Daniel says he drops Kurt off at the Fishbowl Bar. It's confirmed that Kurt was never at the Fishbowl Bar that night. Daniel is incredulous and says that he is applying for sovereign citizenship, claiming he's a natural-born citizen and shouldn't have to be subjected to statuses passed by self-serving people.
The sovereign citizenship is essentially when people believe that the government and all of its structures and the whole legal system are illegitimate. So people who believe that they're sovereign citizens try to do things like issue their own driver's licenses and take liens out against government officials because they believe that the law doesn't apply to them. So a lot of the time this is a way to escape legal responsibility or a way to escape things like paying taxes. You can't apply for sovereign citizenship because sovereign citizenship is not a legitimate legal definition. So you can certainly declare yourself a sovereign citizen and say that the laws don't apply to you, but in actuality, they do.
But the sheriff's investigation is shedding more light on the evening. Earlier on New Year's Eve, Daniel is with local man Jason Bolstad to start off New Year's Eve. And Daniel has something he wants to show him. He pulls out a large firearm from behind a couch, telling Jason that he's a member of the Aryan Brotherhood, a white supremacist gang. Before Kurt arrives at the bar, Daniel is speaking with Carrie, the bartender. He asks her if she's Christian, but before she can reply, Daniel spouts a disturbing revelation. He states that he's the devil and he's here to do the devil's work. Stunned and afraid, Carrie gestures for her husband to stand behind the bar with her. Given Daniel's prior convictions, that Kurt's last confirmed sighting is with Daniel, and that his story is proven to be false, Officer Murray obtains a warrant to search his car. During the search, they find a container holding 5 used rifle shells, along with more ammunition.
When Daniel's arrested, they find him in possession of a firearm, and his vehicle also has more ammunition in it. There's a pattern that's emerging here.
Officer Murray uses the discovery of ammunition in Daniel's van to obtain a warrant to search Daniel's house. Authorities arrive at Daniel's home to look for any evidence that may lead them to Kurt Johnson's whereabouts.
So they're still actively searching the house. They're looking for anything gun-related, anything that points to Kurt, and any other evidence that's linked to this case.
In the kitchen, they find a rifle.
Items considered potentially important are placed into a bag to maintain or preserve evidence of DNA or fingerprints.
The officers continue their search. They find a small container sitting on a coffee table. Inside, they discover it's filled with ammunition. They bag the ammo and continue searching the room.
Officer Murray notices the coloring on the carpet. At the back of the room, there's a significant portion that is lighter in color than the rest of the carpet. And the obvious explanation for this, or the most plausible explanation for this, is that there was a large piece of furniture that was over top of the carpet that's now been moved away.
There's a television directly opposite from where the presumed couch was once positioned. Officers continue to search the laundry room. The room has an awful smell that the officers try to evade as they search, but inside they find haunting evidence. A garbage bag is found which contains a blood-stained couch cushion.
Once investigators determine that there is blood at the scene, they now potentially have evidence of a crime, and this gives them the ability to apply for a warrant, specifically to look for Kurt.
So now we're searching every nook and cranny, any crawl spaces, anything that you expect a person to hide something in. So we're just going through the whole house from top to bottom.
While examining the bedroom, a bullet casing is found on the ground next to a bloodstain. The officer carefully collects the evidence, being sure to preserve any clues that could lead to Kurt's whereabouts, even taking a photo of the bloodstain.
In this scene, blood is found in small droplets, which is consistent with a gunshot wound. How the blood lies on the surface can tell you a lot about how the killer and the victim were orientated in the room.
Blood samples are collected for DNA testing and sent to the lab to find out whose blood it is. Downstairs in the laundry room, Officer Murray is looking for more evidence. He notices a pair of muddy boots and overalls. But the clothing seems odd. Why mud?
Well, in North Dakota, in the middle of winter specifically, the ground freezes quite significantly. So in order to have this much mud on your clothing, one would have to dig down below the frost line in order to have it cling to your clothing. In the middle of winter, to have this much mud on you, that's significant.
If this is the case, then how is there muddy clothing in Daniel's basement? Whatever the mud means, it's leading to a crawlspace door. In the small community of Cooperstown, North Dakota, Kurt Johnson is missing and the authorities have their prime suspect, Daniel Wacht. It's New Year's Eve 2010. After a night of celebration, Daniel Wacht escorts a very intoxicated Kurt Johnson from the bar. But Kurt's family report him missing when he never returns home. Officers Murray and Brown search Daniel's home for any evidence that will incriminate him. The officers find a rifle and ammunition. Officer Brown finds a bullet shell and a blood stain in the upstairs bedroom. In the laundry room, they find a blood-stained couch cushion. Downstairs, Officer Murray discovers muddy boots and overalls. But to access mud during winter in North Dakota, you would have to be exposed to dirt several feet beneath the surface, below the frost line. He focuses on the muddy clothing and then notices a crawlspace door that also has mud on it. He nervously opens the door. fearful for what could be inside. No one knows exactly what happens between the hours of 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. New evidence can provide clues or ideas, but everything is still speculation. Daniel helps Kurt out of the bar with help from Tim Vincent. And throws him into his van. After that, Daniel drives away. This is the last time Kurt Johnson is seen alive. We know Kurt is very intoxicated. Is he willing to tell Daniel where he lives? Intoxication can lead to conflict. Frustrated and angry, Daniel is at a loss as to what to do. He drives to his house instead. Upon arriving at Daniel's home, both men go inside. Daniel makes himself a vodka cocktail while a still intoxicated Kurt Johnson makes himself at home. He notices a gun on the table. In his drunken state, he doesn't comprehend what he's seeing. Daniel notices Kurt looking at his gun, so he picks it up and shows it to him. Finally putting it into his waistband. If Kurt is interested in guns, Daniel has just the thing to show him up in his bedroom. They arrive in the bedroom. Kurt looks around while Daniel reaches for something under his bed. Pulling out a large rifle and shows Kurt. Taken aback by the large weapon, Kurt politely tries to leave. But Daniel has other ideas, stopping him and insisting he stayed. Panicking, Kurt pushes to escape. But Daniel pulls the gun from his waistband and shoots Kurt Johnson in the head. Thinking of his next steps, Daniel must dispose of the body and clean up all the blood. Daniel intently cleans up the evidence. He's precise and calm with his actions, knowing exactly what to do, focused and at ease while doing so. For all his focus and attention, Daniel trips and gets blood on his couch.
The couch is now evidence, and he's going to want to get rid of it. The fact that there's a blood stain and it could be discovered means that he's going to have to eliminate that stain. If you're Daniel, you know that people are going to be looking for Kurt at some point, and you want to eliminate the possibility that there's anything that could tie your involvement to his disappearance back to yourself.
Daniel throws the blood-soaked items into his laundry room. He grabs a pair of boots and overalls. And a saw. Officer Murray peers through the crawlspace door. He sees something and reaches for it, while Deputy Adam Vonasek stands by.
As a new cop, it threw me back a little bit. You see it in movies and TV shows, you don't think you're gonna see it in reality. So it was oh, this is real type moment.
He pulls out Kurt Johnson's head. It's wrapped in a plastic bag, and there's a bullet hole in the forehead.
First of all, we have a single gunshot wound that causes the individual's death, and now we have a severed head. Why?
Daniel is brought into the interrogation room from his holding cell. When confronted with the horrific evidence found in the crawl space of his home, Daniel flatly responds, "I don't know anything about anything." Daniel Wacht is officially charged with the murder of Kurt Johnson. This is his 17th conviction. The trial begins on April 24th, 2012. The evidence speaks for itself. The bullet casings match a gun registered to Daniel. Blood found at the crime scene matches his DNA. And a bloody head discovered in the crawl space. Dental records confirm the head belongs to Kurt Johnson. The muddy clothing suggests Daniel buried the body. But where? Daniel Wacht is found guilty of the murder of Kurt Johnson. He is sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. This is the first murder in Cooperstown in 80 years. An act of violence this disturbing shakes the community to its core. What was once a small, peaceful place is now tainted with the horror of what happened on New Year's Eve 2010.
So the town before is your typical small community where people don't lock their doors, they don't lock their cars. You see kids out after dark walking in the streets, playing. Very safe community. After Cooperstown, you could tell more people are locking the doors, less people on the streets after dark. Kind of became a ghost town.
There's a lot of fear that arose. There's no sense of security. Now we have a capital crime that occurred within the community, and where it happened, it's close to everybody in town.
In these small communities, crimes like this instill a lot of fear in people, and when they wouldn't have locked their doors in the past, they do now.
Phone records show Daniel drives around the countryside on January 4th. Investigators travel along the routes he took in hope of finding Kurt's body. To the disappointment of loved ones, investigators find nothing. Kurt's family hold a service for him in July 2011. In light of this tragedy, the residents of Cooperstown move forward. They mourn for their loved one, but they understand that they must not let this event control how they live their lives. It's often found that amidst times of sorrow, the love that exists in the world is brought to the surface. The community of Cooperstown has been forced to discover this truth.